Line's good.
Never on.
Whoa.
Hard. Hardly.
Come on, Brent.
Line's good.
Got real close.
I hear high, right?
Try and hit 2/3.
Have they saved it for her? Yes, they have.
Welcome to Game of Stones, everybody. I am Sean Graham, Scott. Alongside, as always, hello, Scott.
Sean, it's a great day. Curling season is now officially over.
It is.
I think, unless there's any other events out there. But you know what? What are your plans for the summer vacation?
Just take it easy, relax. It's been a very stressful year. Just maybe slow down a little bit from the very hectic life of the past few months and just see where the wind takes me.
So, probably spend more time at home.
Yeah. Spend some time around the house. Maybe get some stuff done.
Yeah.
That I haven't had time to do around the house,
Fair enough. So, Sean, we're here to talk about the men's power rankings this week.
Yes.
Coming off a terrific U.S. Nationals, both the men's and women's team there.
Yeah. Wonderful event. Congratulations to everyone for being able to pull that off. We know how difficult these events have been to run in this environment, and some great games over the course of the week, and some worthy champions there, Scott.
Yeah, so big congratulations go out to Team
Dropkin
for their big win on the men's side, and on the women's side with Team
Corey Christensen.
But a good job by all teams participating.
Yeah, 100%. So well done to everyone out there. And now we can turn our attention to the summer. And as we did last week, we're going to do some more power rankings. Thank you to everybody for the feedback last week on my rankings of the women's field. And Scott, now it's your turn as we bring on the men.
It's raining men.
Yeah. So we mentioned this a little bit off the top last week. I'm very much an eye test kind of person. See who wins the games, kind of go gut feel a little bit, but you wanted to delve a little bit more into the numbers for your rankings.
I did, Sean. I did. And so what I did was I looked at the current world rankings. For as flawed as they are, they do provide a bit of a barometer. I also looked at Ken Palm's rankings, which are interesting because they weight recent results a lot more heavily than do other systems of rankings. So
Sure.
You do have some outliers when it comes to that, but it does a good job of capturing sort of who's hot in the moment.
Yep.
And then I also looked at some of the statistics, and we've talked about the hammer factor before. And it's something that Curl with Math blog run by
Kevin Palmer.
Exactly. Yeah. So him and his podcast and his website, Curling with Math, or Curl with Math, I think, they've talked about the hammer factor before. And this is a stat that I've used when we've simulated our world championships. I've used hammer factor as a way of gauging performance, predictive performance. So what hammer factor is a sum of the hammer efficiency of a team plus their steal defense.
Okay.
So if you're really good at defending against the steal and you're really good at converting with the hammer, you'll have a very high hammer factor.
Sure. So that makes sense. And really that is one of those stats that you could actually see a correlation to winning there as opposed to, say, shooting percentage.
Yeah, exactly. It tends to slot teams sort of into tiers more than saying, oh, you're 0.01, like you're 1% better on hammer factor.
Right.
Doesn't translate into necessarily something that's a better winning percentage, but it does track pretty well to performance. So what I've done is I've taken those three things, I've smashed them all together, and I've come up with a weighted average where I weight the world rankings the least,
Sure.
and then evenly between the Ken Palm ranking and the hammer factor.
Okay.
To come out with a list of top 10 teams.
Nice.
I will start with a couple of what I call them honorable mentions. They're pretty close.
Okay.
In the end, though, I wanted to stick to my numbers to make this a little more of a scientific analysis.
Okay.
So I will say my apologies first to Team Ross Patterson, not a team that we've seen a lot of this year. I've been competing at that high performance facility up in Sterling.
Yeah.
But Ross White and Bruce Mowat seem to have gone ahead of him in the tiers of Scottish curling. That said, I did use stats from both this season and last season to try and get a bit bigger sample size. And they had quite a good season last year. So they end up just outside the top 10, as do Team Schuster, just outside the top 10. Pretty close. I could have maybe taken them as opposed to the number 10 team, but they were just a little bit too low when it comes to the hammer factor.
Okay.
Actually, not bad hammer factor wise, but I just didn't think they'd played enough games.
Yeah, they only really played at the World Championship. They didn't have a chance to play anything else. In terms of meaningful, I mean, that's mean to the teams that they probably scrimmaged with, but like really meaningful games against top level opponents, things that you would count in rankings. Like Ken Palm only has them at 14 games, for instance, and those would be the 14 games they played at the World Championship. So yeah, I can see where you're coming from there, Scott.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I toyed with the idea of correcting for number of ends played, but dinner was ready, so I had to eat dinner instead. So maybe I'll go back and check that and see if this changes anything, but I don't suspect it will. So I'll get started with the number 10 team, Sean.
Yeah.
Now I did my rankings based on statistics and numbers. So no surprise that Team Gunlickson will come in here at number 10.
Yeah, they love using the numbers, using the analytics. I got to be honest, I'm a little surprised that they are that high, if I'm being totally honest.
To be honest, I was a little surprised too, but their hammer factor ranked 4th out of the 18 teams that I used to that I started with and sorted through.
I'm so surprised at that because it feels like they give up a lot of steals.
So actually their steal defense is one of the highest of all the teams I looked at. It's 22% over the last 2 years. Their hammer efficiency, on the other hand, is pretty good at 43%. It's not super high, as we'll see in the range of the people further up in the list, but it's very good.
Yeah.
In the world rankings, they are ranked 13th, in the Ken Palm rankings 16th, but that hammer factor is what really brings them up. In my rankings up to number 10. So, using the analytics to look at maximizing your opportunities, pretty good. If you want to look just at the wins and losses, they haven't fared that well this year against top 10 teams. By Ken Palm's count, 4-12 against teams that are up into his top 10 for this year.
Right.
So not a great win-loss record, but their underlying stats are good, and we probably expect them to have more wins than they have.
Yeah, I agree that. Yeah, we saw them at the Briar. Some of those top teams, they just didn't. They can't seem to hang with them right now. And Gunlickson certainly yields to or leans towards those big high weight shots, and sometimes they can get them in trouble. They can get them out of a lot of danger too. But it can be problematic. We saw it at the end of a couple games where maybe you draw and go to the extra and take your chances, and he's going with the big weight. Maybe I can win the game right now shot, which for TV purposes is very exciting. No question about it. But in terms of the defense too, they did give up 8 threes during the course of the Briar. And, so that's the kind of thing that at that level, it's hard to give up big ends regularly. And I would say over the course of an 11 game round robin, I would say 8 is pretty regular.
Yeah. Yeah. The hammer factor doesn't take into account, like how many, if you're giving up big ends to your opponent.
Right.
But obviously it's not great if you're giving up bigger ends.
No, they're good at forcing though. They're very good at forcing.
Yes, they are. So that's my number 10.
Okay.
Sean.
Little
Moving
surprised.
up.
I'm a little surprised off the top. I didn't expect them to make it, so
Totally fair.
I'm
Totally fair.
excited to see what's next.
So next up, we're going to go one province over to Saskatchewan, and Team Matt Dunstone is going to be number 9.
Okay.
They've got a hammer factor of 0.6, so 60%, or I guess we'll stick with a straight number and call it 0.6. Slightly lower than the Gunlickson of 0.65. In the world rankings, they're ranked 11th right now. A lot of teams have jumped ahead of them. I think based on the world championships,
Right.
it's number 7 in the Ken Palm rankings. So it averaged out that on my list, they became number 9. Like you say, they're a young team, really on the rise, really quite good.
Mhm.
What I'd say held them back this year is their performance against the other top teams, only 7-7. So they're one of these teams that beats up on everybody they should and gets in a bit more of a dogfight with those other top 10 teams and needs to just push that a little more to get over the edge.
Yeah, and that's the next step for any young team is getting over that hump and back-to-back Brier semifinals, made the playoffs at the Players Championship as well with a 4-1 record at that event, missed at the Champions Cup with a 2-2. But I honestly would have expected them to be a little higher in terms of, where I might put them on the eye test because of their position as an ascending team. That
Sure.
Matt, I think at this point, Matt Dunstone himself has all the shots. And when he was throwing a couple of years ago for Steve Laycock, he didn't have all the shots. Now he does. And certainly the team obviously is a lot stronger because of that. Moskowy, the performance in the semifinal is the best game, all around game I've ever seen him play. So if he can keep that up, we're big Kirk Myers fans on this show. I think that brings such a great dynamic to the team, just in terms of personalities, keeping people talking. He's like a John Morris type where he can just talk about the game all the time. And that level of energy is really good for the team. So in an eye test, I'd have them a little higher, but if the numbers have them at 9, numbers have them at 9.
What I'll say about the men's list is it's a little more Canadian heavy than the women's list was, which I think bears out, right, in what we think of the men's game, a little deeper in Canada than the rest of the world, notwithstanding the results we saw at the men's world championship with 5 teams finishing ahead of Canada. But there's a very deep Canadian contingent with a few very, very strong international teams.
Yeah, I totally agree. The Scotties is a little easier to try to handicap than the Brier is, and the men's worlds is a little easier to handicap than the women's worlds. It's sort of the inverse internationally from what you see domestically almost.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think I have 3 international teams in my top 10, and I will get to the first one now with number 8, and that is going to Team de Cruz out of Switzerland. Sean,
Okay.
Team de Cruz. Number 10 in the Ken Palm rankings, number 9 in the world rankings. They were number 9 in terms of hammer factor on my list. So pretty steady a team. This year, they really suffered playing against those other top teams in the Swiss championships. And again, in the world championships, not as good, but they're a very strong team overall, a medal contender at any Euros or Worlds. Sort of ran into a wall at the men's worlds this year, having to play 3 games in one day, ran out of steam in that second game. So I think this is a pretty fair spot for them, number 8 in the world. What do you think?
No, I totally agree. I think this is a good spot for them. Yeah, they did run out of steam there at the last day, although they did win the last game, right? They did beat the Russians.
They did win the bronze, yeah.
Yeah, in the last game. They lost that middle game to Sweden in a blowout, 11-3 in that game there. But, they were the last team to make the playoffs. They went 8-5, so they were out of all the playoff teams. They were the worst of them, a game better than Italy and Norway. And you're right. They can come out. They can win slams. They could win a world championship. They're certainly good enough, but they could also finish down the pack. And I think the best example of that, or when you're looking around and thinking of how they are conceived of, Silvana Tiranzoni and company had to make the playoffs to get the Swiss Olympic berth. Peter de Cruz had to get to the final to make it into the Olympics as the Swiss team. And that is partly because Yannick Swaller is there as another option, but Elena Stan's there as another option too. So you just look at the overall resume of Peter de Cruz, and very good team, but I think this is a really good spot and probably where I might have had them too on the eye test.
I think so. If we talk about Yannick Schwaller and their hammer factor, they're very similar to Team de Cruz, maybe like 5% difference. So maybe in a different tier, but pretty close. They're close on the world rankings as well. But I do give the edge to Team de Cruz.
All right, let's see what you got at number 7. Maybe more surprises. I've been surprised twice out of 3.
Okay, this one I think is going to surprise you that this team is this low.
Okay, this will be fun.
It's Brendan Bottcher.
What? Really?
Number 7 in the world based on what I've seen, Sean. They're number 4 in the world rankings, number 4 in the KenPom rankings.
Yeah.
But of the teams I rated via hammer factor, they're 15 out of 18. And that is mostly due to a poor steal defense. Only 15% steal defense, this team. So because of that, it really brings their whole number down. Their hammer efficiency is 42%, pretty standard middle of the pack hammer efficiency. But I was surprised by this too, based on everything. You'd think they're good, and they should be in the top 3.
Based on everything, you'd think they're good. That's an Alzheimer quote, Scott. Well done.
But against the other teams in the top 10 this year, 12-12. I think we talked a lot about during the Worlds and the Briar, Sean, that this team doesn't blow you away. And I think these stats sort of play that out. This is a team that'll let you hang around, very similar to a Rachel Homan, which means that they don't come across as very dominating unless they're winning every game, right? But they don't win many games by 3 points or more. So I think that has a lot to do with where they fall in this ranking.
Yeah, I think that's fair. They do tend to play close games. I'll just say at the Briar, they outscored opponents 101-62. They scored 7.2 points a game, gave up 4.4 points per game. They had a total of, 28 ends where they scored 2 or more points. Like that's pretty damn good in terms of generating points for yourself. So I'm surprised that the hammer factor isn't that good. But you are right that when you look at some of the spreads of their games, they do tend to keep it pretty close. Not a lot of blowouts. They blew out McEwen, which is just weird. That's it's not going to happen all the time. And then there are other blowouts were games that you would expect, right? They beat UConn in a big blowout. So that's a little surprising. The other thing I would wonder about this, they weren't great at the Worlds, obviously. Like they won 9 games. They were fine, but they weren't as good as they were at the Briar. And this does lead to the question of bubble fatigue. And was there something to that? Brendan Bottcher also alluded afterwards to the Team Canada structure that is around the team that wins the Briar, and potentially some distraction coming in with that, and sort of like, just, I'm Brendan Bottcher, let me be Brendan Bottcher. And so you do wonder how that might have affected things. And I would throw out the 2 slams for them in terms of just the meaning, whether or not those numbers are meaningful. I would say they're not.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And that is a reason I wanted to take a bigger sample for the hammer factor stats.
Sure.
But the numbers played out the way they did. I'm surprised, but I'm a scientist first and foremost, Sean, and I'll stick to the data.
All right, that's fair. Numbers don't lie, except for when they do.
So the next 2 teams were exactly tied in my weighted average, but I've broken it based on performance this year. So number 6 team will be Brad Jacobs.
Okay.
Brad Jacobs' team, 48% hammer efficiency, 12 steal defense, pretty low steal defense, 0.12.
Yep.
which brought them down in the Hammer Factor rankings. Team Jacobs number 1 in the world right now, according to the world rankings. Let me double check that. That doesn't seem right.
No, they had a run. They won 3 slams last year.
That's right.
They had
That's
the run
right.
of 3 straight slams last year, and so you bank those points. And with no points this year, they're still that's why is because they went on that crazy run last year during the slam season.
So that's best 8 results this season plus 100% of last season's points. Yeah, that puts them pretty comfortably in first place in the world rankings. In the Ken Palm rankings, they are lower than that. I want to say
I have them at 3 here.
3. Yeah, that's right. Third there, but it is the Hammer Factor that's dragging them back again to the number 6 position. Again, this year, 7-10 against first place team or top 10 teams. So that's where they seem to struggle a bit this year. We saw them struggle at the Briar as well. So they come in at number 6.
Yeah, they finished down the pack at the Briar, going 7-5. They lost in that championship pool to Cooey and Dunstone. They also lost to that crazy Glenn Howard, Wayne Madaw team. The big loss, or maybe the most surprising loss for them, was when they lost to James Grattan, of course. And I think this is fair for this team. Honestly, it's probably higher than I would have put them even. Yeah, they win those slams, but maybe it's just because they had such a peak 7 years ago now that you kind of expect that from them, but they haven't been able to replicate it since Olympics Briar on the highest stage, or at least for me, what is the highest stage? It's just, they've gotten to find, they've been in other Briar finals. They've had success at Briars, made playoffs at Briars, but just not being able to get over that hump of winning another one, in my head, kind of sets them back a little bit. And then if you're looking at power rankings as going forward, what do you expect going forward? You can't imagine that this is the team of these 4 past this season. So, as a future looking ahead, this foursome, it doesn't feel like it's long for the world. Jacobs even talked about retiring potentially at the end of the cycle and whether or not it's worth it to keep playing. So, yeah, I think having them here is fair, if not a little high from where I might put them.
Right. And so I would expect a lot of people to think, hey, Brendan Botcher should be higher than Brad Jacobs.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, but what I'm seeing is not telling me the same story.
All right. That's fair.
So next up, Sean, number 5, this team was exactly the same statistics as Team Jacobs, 48% hammer efficiency, 12% steel defense, and it's Team Bruce Mowat.
Wow.
If I'm talking about the last, 4 weeks, they're probably a lot higher. They're probably number 1. And you know what? They are in Ken Palm's rankings. They had a great year this year. Definitely a great team, and one that's, I would say, on the rise. If I was, thinking about future possibilities, like projections a bit, I think they would be higher. But that's where they rank right now. The world ranking of being 5th sort of brings them back a bit. That's where I've got them. What do you think?
I think that's insane. I think they're much better than the 5th best team in the world right now. That they won the 2 slams, silver medal at the World Championship. They, as a team, were the 2nd highest shooting percentage at the Worlds at 87%, 2nd in the draw shot challenge as well, finishing just an inch or a centimeter back. They use centimeters, I think, a centimeter back from the Swiss team of Peter de Cruz. This team was a buzzsaw in the bubble. And again, if you mentioned it, this is ascendancy for this team. They're just getting better and better. There was a really good interview that Bruce did with the BBC before the mixed doubles, where he said that he's starting to believe now that they are one of the best teams in the world and that they can compete with anybody. And there is this idea that in curling, as a skip, you're not in your prime till your 30s. You have to learn how all of the strategy works. You have to see angles, the 10,000 time thing from Malcolm Gladwell. And it just takes so much time, so much repetition to get to that point. And if he can get there a couple of years earlier, in the same way Brendan Botcher potentially can, where you're winning these high level events regularly, this is going to be a lot of fun And
Mhm.
I said it at the men's worlds and during the slams, I'd sign up for a decade of Mouat Botcher world games. Now that is going to be interrupted because I would also sign up for Botcher Dunstone Briar finals for a long time. So certainly Dunstone would win some of them. But overall, I think this is too low for this team based on what we saw over the last 4 months.
Yeah, I can understand that. Your recency bias might be clouding your judgment a bit, but I get where you're coming from, and I'm following what the data is telling me.
Yeah, I just think it's crazy that they're the same as Jacobs. I think they're just, at very different points of the career, and
Yeah,
so
I
that's
agree.
why I use the eye test to differentiate, and which is what you've done here.
Yeah, that's how I differentiated the two based on recent performance, right?
Yeah.
So moving up, Sean, next in the rankings is going to be Kevin Cooey.
Okay.
They have a pretty crazy, insane hammer efficiency the last 2 years of 0.5. So converting 50% of the time with your hammer. That's very good. For those of you who don't know, 16% steel defense adds up to a total of 0.66 hammer factor. This is the third highest hammer factor of the field. In the KenPom rankings right now, they're fifth. In the world rankings, they're down at 10, which I believe is mostly due to Colton Flash leaving the team. So they're, the points are a little lower.
Makes sense.
And they brought in John Morris, who didn't really have any points.
Have any points.
So that brings the team down a bit. But Sean, this is one of the best teams in the world, no doubt. Sometimes you get cooeyed. Sometimes Cooey gets botchered. And, it could have just as easily been Kevin Cooey going back to the World Championships this year. They've been to, 3 of the last 6. They're
something like that. They're really
pretty good.
Yeah,
they're pretty good. What do you think?
I think that's fair. I the question that surrounds this team moving forward is, is 38 minutes enough time for Kevin Cooey to play a 10-end curling game, especially with John Morris there? And I think that is the thing that, it's fun when Cooey's people, but you'd also think that maybe he could be more effective if he manages time through the course of the game better. And that is the thing moving forward, is the communication. It was not great at times during the Briar to watch this team and to see the almost, I don't even want to call it like the communication. Let's say the lack of communication between the 4 of them. And over the course of the summer, I think that's what they're really going to have to focus on. All 4 can make shots. Having John in the house, I would argue he's probably a better person to be in the house than BJ Neufeld. That was the right decision. And I think having John throw third makes a whole lot of sense too when they made that switch. Mixed results at the 2 slams, but first time they've done it. So you can't really take that for too much. So it really is, it's certainly not a question of ability or execution. To me, it's just a question of communication and how the 4 of them can come together over the summer and make that run at the trials.
Yeah, that's fair. I think based on the trials coming up, it's going to be Kevin Cooey, a team that we'll still talk about, or Brendan Botcher, the favorites, right?
Yeah.
I have Brad Jacobs a little bit higher. I don't think they would be one of the favorites going into this event compared to the other ones, but I think there's 3 teams on the men's side that will be the contenders to win it.
I'm going to throw Dunstone in them.
You're going to throw Dunstone in?
Yeah.
He's to me one step below the other 3.
Okay. All right. So Scott, that's 4. Now there's 3 teams left. I'm looking around here. There's 3 teams left on your list. I feel confident that I could guess 2 of them. I have no idea who the 3rd team is going to be.
Really?
Yeah.
Really, Sean?
Really?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to one of them that I think you will guess.
Uh-huh.
And that's the team from the Rock, Brad Gushu.
All right. Yeah.
Coming in at number 3 here on the rankings. World ranked number 3, KenPom ranked number 2. Hammer factor a little bit lower than the rest of the teams. Number 9 on a hammer factor list, only 0.61. It's mostly due to the Steel defense not being as high as some of the other teams. Drops them into the third position. But Sean, this is a team that I think between him and Cooey, they've won whatever the last 6 or 5 of the last 6 Canadian championships now. They're going to be a team fighting for the podium there at the trials come end of November.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, they're a really great team. Brad showed, his versatility. He was able to sweep last week.
Wow.
Got some ribbing from some of his other, some of his teammates, justifiably or not.
Very justifiable.
Yeah, and just one of the best teams in the world.
Yeah, no question about it. That front end is great of Walker and Gallant. I think Mark Nichols he's certainly in the conversation. I think he's the best men's third in the world. If I was drafting a team and for some reason I'm the skip and I can pick a third and it's anyone in the world, I think I'm picking Mark Nichols as that third. So, and we saw it, the 2020 Brier final, he won it. He was the MVP of that game. And when he's on, this team is impossible to beat. The question, of course, is Brad Gushu. He seems to be over his hip issue, and hopefully that it remains the case moving forward. He can be healthy competing once we get into the fall. And I certainly no complaints about having this team that high. Disappointing week at the Brier for them not making the playoffs, certainly, but they respond, go 8-1 in the round robins of the 2 Grand Slams, losing one of the finals there to Bruce Mouat on a great shot at the players that Bruce made to win that event. So, and no issue here for me that they are in the top 3 in the world.
Good, because I think you'll have an issue with the next team, Sean.
If this is, I'm guessing this is a team that I was struggling. I just looked at the list of the order of merit, and I think I could guess who it is now, but they would not have been front of mind as a top 2 team in the world if who you say is who I now think you are going to say.
Yeah, so this team gets up to the top of these rankings based a lot on their world ranking, which was built up through a great 2019 fall spieling season, including a Canada Cup win. Their hammer factor is second in the field, 0.67. This is Team John Epping.
Yeah, this is crazy.
The numbers say that they're a very good team, and they have had success at the highest level. He's made a Brier final.
No,
I'm wrong.
He has not.
A playoffs anyway. Won a Canada Cup. Won a bunch of events in the fall of 2019, as I mentioned. What brings them down is their most recent performance, right? So where, Sean, your eye test sees, okay, what's the most recent performance? That's what I'm going to base things on. This sort of takes into account a little more full view of the last 2 seasons. And this team is a really good team. And I would agree with you that I don't think I would put them as one of the favorites in Saskatoon. No. But the numbers tell me that they should be one of the favorites.
Okay. All right. Here's what I'll say. Yes, they've had some success. John Epping, most recent Grand Slam 2018 with the National. They won the Canada Cup in 2019, the first team to secure that Olympic trials berth. Bronze medal at the 2018 Brier. 2020 was in that just massive tiebreak situation as the host team. Missed the playoffs at this year's Brier. They went 1-3 in the championship pool in the bubble and really struggled towards the end of the week. But Scott, the issue with John Epping is they can score. There's no question they can score. They could put up a 4 at any time during the game. They could give up a 4 at any time during the game too. They're not as good, I think, in terms of the record as the component parts would indicate that they should be. I think Fry has been an improvement for the team, no question. And Fry himself as a player is a better player now than I think he was a few years ago, at least in terms of disposition, and fits better with this team. than the last couple years of Jacobs. You can't argue with the 13, 14, 15 Jacobs dynamic, but towards the end, it wasn't as great. And this is a much better situation for him. But overall, you just don't see the results in the same way as some of these other teams that are behind them. And then you have the variable of John Epping. And he's the first to admit this, that he is not the most technically sound player in the world. He can fishtail, he can be a little all over the place. That leads, to me at least, to a little greater variability in his performance game to game. And therefore, the success that we saw, say, at the 2019 Canada Cup, it's not replicated as frequently as, say, Kevin Cooey, who throws the exact same way every single time. And that is my biggest concern with John Epping, is that you just don't know game to game how technically sound he is going to be.
Yeah, those are all totally fair arguments. I don't really disagree with anything that you're saying. I will maybe just push back a bit on saying, well, they weren't that good at this year's Brier in the bubble, 1-3 in the championship pool. I don't want to overvalue bubble performance one way or the other, right?
Sure.
Because it was so weird, because, you know, everybody reacts differently. I wanted to take a little bit longer view of it. So doing it that way got me this team up to the top. I think, you know, when we previewed the Brier, I think John Epping would have been in that sort of second tier, you know, below Botcher and Cooey and maybe Dunstone.
Yeah, I think so.
As the favorites, sort of in the same tier as Brad Jacobs, as Matt Dunstone, you know?
Yep.
So yeah, maybe these numbers do like overinflate a bit and you know, value what they've been doing with the hammer a little bit more. What's really buoyed them here is the steal defense percentage, which is 21. So that boosts a pretty, you know, standard hammer efficiency for a top 10 team in the world. Nothing really sticking out, but that's sort of what gets them to this spot. And I think that they will be a dark horse at the event in Saskatoon, someone to look for that maybe others are overlooking based on, you know, the success of Botcher and Cooey.
All right. I mean, I think that's fair. And you know, I would put them in the top 10 in the world, right? So, you know, my slagging on them isn't to say that they're no good. You know, I think they are a top 10 team in the world. I just want to see it at a Brier, at maybe a world championship. We'll see what happens at the trials, you know, and maybe I do over sort of, or think that the national championships are more important than the slams, and I overvalue them potentially. But, you know, to me, that is the pinnacle. That's where you have to really get one of those to put yourself on that list of as among the greatest. And he hasn't done that yet. And even at the slams, if you want to say the slams are part of that, he doesn't have the same record at the slams as some of the guys behind him.
Yep. That's fair. That's fair.
All right. So Scott, that doesn't leave much drama, at least in my mind, as to who is left on the list.
No, if anybody is struggling to figure it out, then for shame. It's the king himself, the Swedish king, Nicholas Edin, and his team, easily number one in hammer factor on the back of a 52% hammer efficiency the last couple of years, ranked number 6 in Ken Palm's rankings, number 8 in the world. Mostly that world ranking is due to, you know, fewer events played, especially this year. And the Ken Palm ranking reflecting not an ideal outing for them at the world championships. You know, that other than winning. Yeah.
They were terrible. They were terrible all week, other than the fact that they won.
Well, they weren't as dominant, I'd say, as you would have thought they would be going in, right?
Okay. They weren't as dominant. They only outscored their opponents by 39 points, and they only had the best shooting percentage as a team by 2 points. So, yeah, really did struggle over the course of the week.
Sean, I'm trying to come up with a reason for why they're 6th in the Ken Palm rankings.
I think it's this. My guess is that it's the slams.
Yeah, and 9 and 8 against other top 10 teams, based on those numbers there. So despite all that, Sean, their hammer factor leads them to number one. Great team. They're definitely a gold medal favorite at the Olympics in 2022. And what's Nicholas Edin won? What is it? 5 world championships now? Is it 6? I can't even count.
Five,
So
five. Yeah, 5. And he's won 5 of the 6 world championship finals he's been in. So he's made 6 finals and won 5 of them. It's a pretty good record.
Very good. And that only loss would be to Brad Gushu in 2018, I believe. Or
17.
17.
Yeah.
So there you go. Like, I don't think there's much to nitpick about this one, is there?
No, really, really good. They're great. And, 7 Euros on top of that. He's won the World Juniors. The only thing left for him to win, again, similar to what we said about Anna Hasselberg last week, unless you want to go win the seniors and then eventually the masters, if that's really important, you still have those left to win. But it's the Olympic gold medal that is going to be the last thing for him to, I guess, get to that Brad Gushu level of the trifecta of all those things that you can win internationally. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in Beijing for this team after losing the gold medal game to Schuster back in 2018. But I have no problem with them being the top team in the world. You get this weird thing that happens every so often on Twitter when they win a world championship where people say that they're overrated because they just win world championships, which I get somewhat confused by, and that their record at slams isn't the greatest, I guess. I mean, he's won 3 of them. So, they're not bad at the slams by any means. So I think, if he wins a couple more slams, maybe people will slag off him. But certainly it's a team that, from what I can see, focuses their schedule around being in peak form at that world championship.
I think so. That's what they play for. And to be honest, it's their biggest challenge every year, right?
Yeah.
The world championship. So, yeah. All right, Sean, I'll recap now my top 10.
Let's do it.
And you can note your surprise by each one by rating it from 1 to 5 guffaws.
Okay.
All right. So number 10, Jason Gunlickson.
That's a 2 guffaw for me.
Number 9, Matt Dunstone.
That's a 3. It should be higher.
Number 8, Peter DeCruz.
0. I'm fine with that.
Right on. 7, Brendan Botcher.
That's a 4.
Okay. 4. It should be higher.
It should be higher. Yeah.
Number 6, Brad Jacobs.
I think it's a 1. Maybe I think I'd have him lower.
Okay. 5, Bruce Mowat.
4. I'd have him higher. I think they're 2.
You think they're 2?
Yeah.
4, Kevin Cooey.
That's a 0. I think that's a good spot for him.
And Brad Gushu, number 3.
Yeah, I'm good with him at 3. Well, actually, I might flip Gushu and Cooey, but that's splitting hairs. So I'm good with both of those.
Epping at 2.
That's a 5.
5 guffaws.
Stunning to me.
And number 1, Nicholas Edin.
Yeah, 100%. 0 guffaws.
0. Right on. So, that's what my numbers are telling me. I've obviously weighted things a little bit differently based on what I value. I'm sure everybody else's list is going to be subjective as well and have different sort of factors in there. I want to hear from you. Why am I crazy? Why am I brilliant? Hopefully there's more of those. But let me know what you think.
Yeah, reach out to us. You can find Scott on Twitter at ScottLikesTV. At him. We encourage that. You can also let us know what you think of these rankings on Twitter, Instagram at Game of Stones Pod, or just hit us up on email, gameofstonespodcast@gmail.com. Scott, well done.
Thanks, Sean. That was a lot of fun, pouring over the spreadsheets like I like to do.
Yeah, and you done it good, buddy.
Thanks, man.
All right, so that will do it for this week's episode. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. Please do subscribe if you have not yet, wherever it is you get your podcast, likes, rating, comments, all that fun stuff. As we said, reach out to us on social media at Game of Stones Pod or email gameofstonespodcast@gmail.com or head on over to gameofstonespod.com. All of our past episodes are there, plus links to the merch as all the proceeds from t-shirts are going to Food Banks Canada, all the rest of the merch to the Sandra Schmirler Foundation, and we are matching all those proceeds. So head on over, check all that stuff out. And we will be back with you next week for another new episode as we are fully into this summer swing, publishing new episodes every Tuesday until we get to the fall and start to get back into the swing of covering some of the events. Some great ideas on tap, Scott.
Yeah, I'm looking at your idea list right now. It looks really fun. It's going to be good stuff.
Yeah, so do join us for all that starting next week. But until then, keep those brooms on the ice and don't dump that intern.
Make the final.